Hello again and welcome back to another episode of Adding Game Sounds, where today we're going to try to knock out quite a few events and sounds actually. We're going to do a lot of one-shots today, and what I've done is I've made a single script that basically will play all of the one-shots that I want it to on all of the different objects and in all of the different locations that I want it to. So before we start, I just want to quickly apologise for not uploading very much recently. I'm going to try and do some more uploads soon. I've got a few more FMOD and Unity ideas. So stick around if you're interested in learning more about those. But yeah, we're going to crack on with what we've got going on today. So I'm going to start by showing you the script I've made. Now, like I said, it's a kind of all-purpose simple script for just playing one-shots. For this game anyway, it works quite well. It's called Trigger Audio, and I've got it saved in the Assets, 2D Game Kit, Scripts, Audio, FMOD Scripts folder that we made. So let's just quickly take a look, and we'll start with that. And then once we've kind of got an idea of how the script will work, we'll look at the FMOD events and the actual sounds that we'll be using this script with. So the way it works is that I create a public string and I use the FMOD Unity event ref attribute above it like that. And what that does, I think I've talked about this in other videos, but it basically allows you to access which event in FMOD you'd like to play with this script from within Unity's editor, more specifically the Inspector tab. So for example, if I quickly click on one of the objects that's using this script, I think for example, the switches that you need to shoot to, progress, open doors and such, has it attached. So there you go, down here, this is the script. As you can see, I can select from the Inspector tab which event in FMOD I want to use. And then from that, it will pass it through and store it inside this variable. Nice and easy. I've then made my own public function called play one shot. Now this function will be accessed from other scripts, which I'll talk about in a little bit. That's why it's public. And then inside it, I've just got a play one shot attach command. So what this does is it takes whatever event was stored inside that variable that we, allocated within Unity. It takes that and then it plays it at the location of whatever game object this script is attached to. So it's nice and easy stuff. You'll also notice that I've created a public bool called play on awake. Again, it's public so that it can be accessed in the Inspector tab, and I can quickly tick yes or no on the script, or not the script, the component of it, for each object it's attached to. Let's go back into the script quickly. The way it works is that on the very start, in the start function, so on the first frame that the game is run, this if statement will check to see if that boolean is true or false. If it's true, then it's going to play our function. So on the basically this acts as a way of saying, do you want to play this one shot straight away or not? Now for most of the objects, this will not be necessary and will actually just be accessing this function directly. But on one, there is a case where I wanted it to play on awake. So the start function will then trigger this function to play. And we'll get onto that when we talk about the sound and the object. So as you can see, it's a nice, easy script. If you want to use this for yourself, I'll have it on my website. You can simply just copy and paste it from there. So to find that, there'll be a link in the description underneath this video. You're more than welcome to use it. But yeah, like I said, nice and easy script. Nothing too complicated going on here. So now let's have a look at the the events I've created in FMOD and all the different sounds that we're going to be using this script for. Okay, so the first one is called Key Pickup. It's a 3D event and it's designed to be played as a one-shot, like all of these events will be that I'll talk about in a sec. So let's have a quick listen. Nice and simple stuff. The audio file I'm using is the generic pickup audio file. I think the only real changes to this event I made was, here we go, if I click on the audio file itself, I just added some modulation to the pitch and the volume so it sounds a little bit different each time. Just only very slightly, not by too much. I also changed the min and the max distance of the volume attenuation, because obviously I've explained this before. The camera is, there's a bit of distance between the camera where the FMOD Studio listener is, where basically the ears of the player are, and the player character, which if I go into the game, here, this lady here, Ellen. So because there's a bit of distance between the two, if we left this to the default of 1 and 20, all of our sounds would be quite quiet because they'd be quite far away. And if you imagine this graph here basically most of our objects would be about here on the graph, whereas we want them for the most part a little bit louder than that, unless the player moves away from them. So that's why I've made some adjustments there, but other than that, that's pretty much it. Nice and simple stuff. So if we go back into Unity, there's actually two different objects that's going to be using this event. Now the first one is these switches up here. These switches are designed to be shot at, and when they're shot at, they'll activate something in the level or the world. So for example, in the case of this one here, when this is shot at, it opens up this door below it. Now, because this game kit is designed for you to be able to create your own levels with, essentially, and practice making games, these have been designed so that you can basically tell it to activate quite a lot of different things. You can make it not only open doors, but play different sounds. Maybe you can turn lights on and off. There's all sorts of stuff. And the way it does that is it uses Unity events, I think they're called. Basically, these boxes here, which we've looked at a little bit before in the past, I just didn't know what they were called. I believe they're called Unity events. So this box here that says on enter and on exit. They've got different names because that kind of describes how they'll function when they'll trigger, essentially. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about how you kind of code Unity events into your scripts, even though they're pretty easy and they're pretty simple to do, because we won't be doing any coding. All we're going to be doing is interacting with them from the inspector tab of different objects like this one here. So if you want to learn a little bit more about how you can code your own Unity events, again, I'll have a link in the description for you to access a really good tutorial I found on YouTube. But to give you an idea of how these work, they basically are designed to trigger everything that's within the box when they're told to, essentially, if that makes sense. So in the case of this box, it's basically designed to trigger when something enters the trigger area set to this switch. So whenever something enters the area, everything inside this box will be triggered. And this is quite nice because not only can you trigger, multiple functions, multiple things to happen, but you can trigger all these things to happen from any object and any script inside your scene. So it's a really nice way of interacting with multiple objects at once in a nice, easy way. You can also check for objects of a specific tag or a specific layer that enter the area first before you trigger all the stuff in the box. For example, in this case, interact on trigger 2D, they're checking for any objects of the bullet layer, which is obviously going to be the bullets that the players shoot. So obviously what I wanted to do was use this Unity event to trigger my function I made in my script whenever a bullet enters this area. So what I did is I came to the, in fact, it's here. Let me quick, I wonder if I can remove it quickly and I'll do it again. There we go, cool. So start afresh. First of all, what I did is I attached this script here, the trigger audio script, the one I made earlier, as you can see here. I then selected the event I wanted, which was the key pickup event. And then I came to the Unity event box, click the little plus arrow. Then I have to select the object, the script, and the function that I want to trigger. So the object is the same object we're interacting with here, the single use switch. So to find it, we'll just scroll down our hierarchy tab, select its name, and drag it into the object box here. Then we need to select the script we want, which is the trigger audio script I created. And then we select the function, which is the play one-shot function I created. And that's as easy as that. It's done. So as soon as the bullet enters this area, it will now trigger our event to play. So as you can see here, if I now shoot the switch, you should hear it kind of glow and go ba-doong as the bullet enters the trigger area. Now what's nice is a lot of the objects in this episode we'll be looking at use these Unity events. So triggering our function is going to be nice and easy. All we need to do is simply pick which event we'd like to trigger and we're good to go. Before we move on, the other object that uses this key pickup event, if I scroll down here, are these little keys here. You need to collect 3 of them throughout the game in order to enter the boss level. And if we scroll down, again, you can see another on enter Unity event. So just like last time, I've attached our script to the object. I've selected the event I want to play. And then inside the Unity event box, I've picked the object that contains the script and the function, which is, the same object we're looking at, the key. So I just dragged it over from the hierarchy tab into the box, then selected the script and then selected the function, which is play one shot. So let's quickly show you how that sounds. Okay, so now if the player collects the key, we hear the little key sound. Okay, so the next event we'll be looking at is the health pickup sound. So basically throughout the game, there's these boxes that if you're missing a heart or a bit of health, if you walk into these boxes, again, activate a trigger area, you get some more health, and the sound I've made for it is thus. So as you can see, it uses 2 files. It uses a crate smash sound, because these boxes look like they're made of stone. And it also uses the health pickup sound, which is a bit more of a glowy, hummy kind of sound. Nothing too much else to say about this. Again, it was nice and simple because it's just a one shot. I didn't really do any modulation to this sound because there's only a few health boxes scattered around the world. So you can add a bit of modulation if you like, but I've just left it as it is. So let's have a look at the health boxes in Unity. So the first one in this level I'm looking at is over here. There we go. So if I click on it, if I click on the parent object of it, the main one, as you can see, again, it's using Unity events. So again, whenever this box is giving health to the player, however that entails, I'm not 100% sure, but luckily we don't need to know. We want it to take this script that's attached to this object here, the health pickup object, and take the play one shot function that lives inside of it. And then obviously, again, select the event we want to play, which is health pickup. So let's have a listen to how that sounds. Okay, so if you're low on health and you walk into the trigger area of this health box, you hear the health sound. Admittedly, that was a little quiet. So what I might do in FMOD is just turn it up a little bit because I did turn down the master track. In fact, I've just noticed I haven't adjusted the minimax distance, so I might just do that. There we go. And maybe leave that about -6. And I'll try and test that later. I'm not really looking at levels too much. In fact, I might even make a separate episode for mixing and balancing all the levels. For now, we just want to make sure that the audio triggers and plays. Okay, so next, pressure pads. So like the keys we were talking about earlier, pressure pads in this game are set up to do anything you want, basically. It depends on what you tell it to interact with when triggered in Unity's editor. So let's have a listen to how this sounds. Cool, again, one single sound to play as a one shot. So let's jump back into Unity and let's check out one of the pressure pads. So here's the first one I can find in this level. Let's click on the object. As you can see, this is the object here, pressure pad. Again, using Unity events, so it's nice and easy for us to trigger our event. I've attached our script, the trigger audio one, and then on pressed, when the pressure pad's pressed by whatever, I think it can be either the player or the big boxes you can push around in this level, it will find our script and it will play our one-shot event. And again, as always, I've selected the event I want it to play. Oh, whoops, don't want to play it on awake. Yeah, so let's have a listen to how that sounds. Okay, so here we are. Here's our pressure pad, and here is the box that we're going to push onto it. So let's give it a push. And there we go, we can hear our sound. And the final event I've made for this episode is called Column Smash. Now, in one or two of their levels, there's these columns that you need to attack with your staff, your melee weapon, and they crumble. Now, I did want to do something a little bit different with this, and I might even come back to it. Basically, when it crumbles, it breaks up into multiple game objects that basically act as like, the separate rocks that fall apart. Now, I did want to add a sound that whenever these collide with something, they make an extra sound. So they kind of, every time you smash one of these, they sound different. And every time a rock collides with something, whether it be the floor or another rock, you hear an extra sound, and it just makes them all feel a lot more varied and different. It kind of sounded a little bit messy using the audio files you and I have access to with the 2D game here. So if we open up the audio bin, go interactables, these two files here, Destructible Wall 01 and Destructible Wall 02, are, they're created for this purpose. And neither of them I felt worked for the individual rocks. They sounded too harsh and too messy, basically, when there was loads of them playing at once. So I might come back to it, I might not. But in the meantime, we've just got one shot to play whenever the wall smashes. So let's have a quick listen. Nice and simple. Now, very occasionally, when I triggered this audio in the game by smashing down these destructible walls, I got kind of a weird flangey effect. And it sounded almost like two of these events were playing at the same time, but with the tiniest little time delay. So to fix that problem, what I've done is come down to the event macros. I've limited the amount of times this can play to one at a time. In fact, now I'm looking at that, I probably don't even need to do that. So I'm going to change that to infinite. What I did though, or the main way to fix this I've found, is by adding a cooldown. So in case you don't know, by adding a cooldown, this event won't be allowed to play. Once it's played, it won't be allowed to play again until this cooldown is up. So I've set it to about 60 milliseconds. So hopefully the second time this event was playing will be within the 60 milliseconds and therefore won't trigger again. If not, I'll change this back, but you can use either one of those options. You can limit the amount of times an instance of this event can be triggered, or you can set a cooldown so that a certain amount of time has to pass before the event can be played again. Either way, I'm just going to quickly press F7 and make sure that's saved. And let's go find some of those destructible columns in our game. Now, they're not in this level here, level 4, so I'm going to quickly go to the 2D Game Kit folder. I'm going to go Seeds, and I think the best place to go for this would be Zone 3. So let's quickly save this and head on over to it. Okay, so here is one of the destructible walls. So if I give it a smack with the staff, there you go, the one-shot's triggered. And if I hit this one as well, it also is destroyed. So this is the object here, destructible column. Let's quickly open up the parent object. And the way I noticed this works, even though there's two, there's one object that represents all of the little separate rock objects that make up the wall as a whole. And then there's a second one where they're all separated and it's broken. And then you kind of see the physics come into play where they all fall about separately. Before it's attacked, you only get this object here where they're, together as a whole. This object is activated, whereas the broken one is not. But when it's attacked, this object is deactivated and the broken one is activated. And then that kind of creates the scattery rock effect. So seeing as that's when the object is broken, that's when I've decided to trigger our audio. Now, as you can see, there is no Unity event for us to use this time, which is where the play on awake boolean I created earlier comes into play. Because this object starts off deactivated and isn't activated until the player smacks it and destroys it, which is the same time as when we want to play our audio, I've set it to play on awake. So our event, which we can, obviously select by clicking the little search bar and clicking column smash, this will now play whenever this object is activated. And remember that works because we told in our start function, which will do whatever we tell it to on the very first frame that our game object is activated on, to play the function, play one shot, which contains our play one shot command and the event we want to play. Cool, nice and easy stuff. Now, whilst I was in the middle of recording this episode, I actually noticed that there's one more one shot we can add using this method, and that is when the player first picks up their weapons. So what I've done is I've just quickly created an event for that called weapon pickup. This one I've made 2D. I didn't feel it was necessary to place it in the world in a specific location, so that makes things a little bit easier for us. If I quickly play you the event, as you can see, it's using two audio files that come with the game kit. It's using the space shotgun sound and the spike impact sound. I couldn't actually find a purpose for these two anywhere else in the game, so I figured I might as well use them here, seeing as I think this is where the player gets both the gun and the staff, so it makes sense to have both of these sounds. And all I've really done is I've just adjusted the levels of them both so they kind of fit together nicely, turned the master down a bit, and that was it. Nice and easy stuff in FMOD. Then inside Unity, wouldn't you know it, we can use the same method we've been using this whole episode. So the object in question now is weapon pickup. As you can see, again, it's using the Unity events box, so it's nice and easy for us. All we have to do is add our trigger audio script, select the event we want to use, which is weapon pickup. Don't want to play it on awake, we want to play it when the player enters this trigger area. And so if we go to the event, you can see I've added the the object that our script is attached to, which is weapon pickup again. And then selected the script and the function we want to trigger. As you can see here, everything in this box will trigger when the player enters the area. We can double check it is a trigger area by looking at the collider component and seeing that the is trigger box is marked as true. So let's give this event a test. So now if the player walks into this trigger area, they get their weapons and you can hear the appropriate sound. One last thing I want to mention before I sign off today is that with the objects that appear multiple times throughout the game and throughout the scenes, instead of individually attaching our script to each one, which can take up a little bit of time, what you can do is find the prefab file of the object within your GameKit's files and just attach the script to that. And then whenever it's loaded into the game, it will have your script attached to it and ready to go. So for example, if I scroll around, we'll use the health box as an example. So here we go. Here's one of the health boxes. Now what I did to find it in our files is inside the project, I just looked at the name, health pickup. Sometimes they do change the name of the objects within the hierarchy tab. So that's something to bear in mind. But for the most part, they're the same name. So if we type in health, what was it? Health pickup. There we go. So that is the prefab here. You can tell if we click on it because the file itself ends with .prefab. So we know that's the right one. So let's click open up prefab and then select the object or the specific object within the parent and the child objects we want to attach our script to. For us, it's the health pickup object, the parent of all of them, because that actually has our Unity event on it and controls what happens when the player interacts with it. And then from here, we simply add our script. So we go add component, search for the name, which for us is trigger audio, and you're good to go. Once you've done that, you might see like a little loading or a little saving icon around your mouse. Like if you're on Windows, for example, a little blue wheel. And that basically means it's saving and applying that change. But I always like to save my project with Control S just to double check. And then all we could do is hit the back arrow, find an object in your scene, and you should notice the change applied. And the only object that wanted to play up a little bit for me when doing this method by making changes to the prefab was these switches here. So I made the change, but for some reason not all of them had the script attached to them. So for that I did have to go through them manually and attach them, but for the most part that should save you some time. Oh, and if you are making edits to the prefab, add the script and don't forget also to make changes to the Unity event. So add the script and then choose which object you want to trigger a function with when this event is activated, and then the function in the script as well. And yeah, that's everything from me today for this episode. So that was a nice, easy episode for us to get back into the swing of things. Like I said, I want to do some more videos with this. Maybe, as well as continue this series, do some separate FMOD and Unity stuff, focus on FMOD 2.0 a bit, because with this I'm still using FMOD 1.10. And there definitely are some really cool stuff I want to look at. But as always, if you have any suggestions, feel free to add them in the comments of things you want to see. I'm open to any and all suggestions. But if not, I've been Henry Scott, and I will see you in the next one.